Klopp's Liverpool has at times played some of the most exhilarating attacking football that England's seen since his arrival on Merseyside. But recently, the goals have completely dried up, with 0 scored in their last 4 Premier League matches. Hey, I'm Adrian, and today we've teamed up with Ben Bocic from First Time Finish. He's the co-founder there. He also wrote a book called The Story of You'll Never Walk Alone, and he's the editor of Rush the Cop, to bring you a look at why Liverpool are struggling and what they could try to rectify things in the attack, plus how their lack of cover and defense has caused sort of a ripple effect of issues throughout the squad. But before that, we have to thank our sponsors over at OneFootball for making this video possible. OneFootball is the perfect app for fans of Liverpool, the Premier League, and, well, football in general. Get all of the fastest breaking news sent to you as it happens about the teams and competitions you care about with their custom-tailored news feed. Plus, follow matches on the go with their match tickers, track the transfers your team is making or not making with their transfer rumor raters, and more. Support the channel by using the link below to get a free download on either iOS or Android. Alright, we'll start with the defense, touch upon the midfield, and spend the majority of our time on Liverpool's most problematic area, the attack. After winning the Premier League title, Liverpool didn't exactly rest on their laurels, you could say, during this past summer's transfer window, bringing in Portuguese attacker Diogo Jota, an instant hit, as well as one of the best central midfielders in recent football history, Thiago Alcantara, in order to help unlock the defenses of those teams that sit back. Something they didn't bring in was another centre back. And when you have defenders such as Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk, throw in Joel Matip as a third choice, and your options are good for that position, if not great. But as far as depth goes, Van Dijk's injury record is good. You have Joel Matip, that is often injured, and Gomez, that has also seen his fair share of injuries for his young age. You're playing a dangerous game and starting the season with just 3 senior centre backs. October 17th, Virgil van Dijk is clattered by Jordan Pickford in the Merseyside derby and is ruled out for at least 6 months, perhaps even the season, due to a complete tear of his ACL that would require surgery. October 26th, just over a week later, and Joel Matip sustains a knee injury and is out until mid-January, about 3 months. November 11th, 2.5 weeks after Matip's injury, nearly a month after Van Dijk's, and Joe Gomez injures his knee in training while on international duty. In just under a month, all 3 of Liverpool's senior defenders are wiped out, the top 2 of which, in Gomez and Van Dijk, facing potential season-ending injuries, or at the minimum, missing out on the majority of the season. And so it again highlights their decision to not bring in another defender, especially in losing Dejan Lovren. The kids that have filled in, such as Reece Williams, had done just fine, and Fabinho has proven he's adept at playing in the midfield and the back line, but personally, pulling both Henderson and Fabinho out of the midfield isn't the most ideal situation for a manager, and those centre-back injuries have caused a ripple effect throughout the team. But let's check in with Ben Bocic to see what he makes of all of this.
I'm going to defend Liverpool here. It's a very unprecedented situation to have 2 of your first choice centre-backs out with injuries, with long-term injuries as well, so possibly both of them are out for the season. Kind of a small risk at start, which in hindsight has turned into a huge risk. In all fairness, I think Fabinho is not a bad defender, and I think if you're going to play someone centre-back, he's probably a better option than we had in Lovren, really. He's way more solid than Lovren ever was at centre-back. It's definitely caused a ripple effect though, for sure. Matip and Fabinho don't have the pace of Joe Gomez or Van Dijk. Teams can exploit our high line. If you look, a lot of the goals we have conceded have been through counter-attacks.
Now, of course, there's a handful of names that always get tossed around when speaking of centre-back options for clubs. The Leipzig guys, Konate and Upamecano with his infamous 40 million buyout clause, Jules Koundé from Sevilla, Koulibaly rumors never end, David Alaba is being shopped around by his agent, and on and on. But in diving into the analytics, Ben has come up with a bit of an outside bet, a very interesting outside bet, and one that could aid Liverpool's defense and in turn, the rest of the team.
In terms of like-for-like replacement for Van Dijk, I think you can't come closer than Ezri Konsa at Aston Villa. I think he hasn't been dribbled past at all this season, not once. So that kind of reminds me of someone in a certain number 4 at Liverpool. But in addition to that, he also has the pace, he has the height, the aerial ability to become a really commanding centre-back. And interestingly, him and Joe Gomez, both the same age and both started out at Charlton Athletics. So there's a bit of a relationship there, potentially.
A signing like this would mean Fabinho could be played in the midfield again, that Liverpool wouldn't get exposed for their lack of pace in that sector of the pitch. Now, as mentioned, the Van Dijk and Gomez injury has rippled throughout the team. Of course, Thiago was brought in to help with the creativity in the midfield, to unlock the defenses of those teams that sit incredibly deep, to help play the ball through those acute spaces for the front line to latch onto. But due in part to his own injuries and the slow centre-back issues that we've covered already, it hasn't been a dream start for him yet.
So I think where Liverpool are struggling is that lack of a number 10 in the midfield. Well, Liverpool's midfield, the issue is not with the defensive outlet.
How do you feel that their midfield is operating overall at this point in the season?
Poorly. But I don't think it's entirely the midfield's fault. I think a lot of it comes to do with the way Liverpool need to set up nowadays to counter the counter-attacks and the low defensive blocks. And like I told you before, Fabinho and Matip don't have a lot of pace. So a lot of attackers can exploit that. And because of that, the midfield often need to sit back, drop back a bit and cover. So that hasn't really helped. When you want to break down a low defensive block, you want your midfielders to push up as high as possible so you can create the little spaces in behind, find those tiny gaps through the defensive block. You can't really have that at Liverpool because someone like Thiago often is forced back to sit in front of the defense.
So I think it's safe to say that the midfield personnel is good and they don't really need any depth signings as they do in defense. Naby Keita could find some fitness and he'd be a major boon to their squad. If they had another defender brought in and Fabinho could move into midfield, Thiago's leash could be loosened and he could push forward a little bit more because he has Fabinho covering for him. If Oxlade-Chamberlain can find the form that he was in the 2017-18 season, that's another force to be reckoned with in the midfield. Shaqiri, Wijnaldum, they have options.
I remember the beginning of the 17-18 season without Van Dijk, where Liverpool's defence was a bit atrocious, a bit of a shambles, especially through set pieces. We were kind of having the same problems we are now. But we had Coutinho as the number 10 with Salah, Firmino and Mane, and that was the most pure attacking football I've ever seen us play. It was just so much fun. That was when we really thrived as an attack.
And speaking of which, now, when speaking of Liverpool's attack, there are a couple of asterisks we need to take note of. After 19 matches played, they have still scored more goals than any other team in the league. That's the good part of it all. But here's the bad. In their 5-match winless run in the Premier League, 2 of which have been losses, Liverpool have failed to score in 4 of their matches. They are yet to score a Premier League goal in 2021. Why is that? They have all the same attackers that have done so well for them in the past there.
It almost looks like there's a mix of the players being a little bit tired from this compact schedule, perhaps lacking a bit of confidence. Perhaps their confidence has been shaken because, they're not able to do as they used to. What would you say is one of the biggest contributing factors to their attack sort of being a bit blunt?
I think it's a mixture of mental and physical fatigue. I think what people don't take into account is in the last 4 years, how many games Salah, Mane and Firmino have actually played. I can't remember a time when either of them ruled out with a long-term injury. I think a lot of Liverpool's lack of creativity comes from them having to sit back. Even the fullbacks, you see Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson aren't bombing forward as much as they were before.
No question, they could use some rotation. The lack of use of Takumi Minamino is a bit of a weird one. He started with Firmino against Crystal Palace, scored a goal, and we never saw him again in the Premier League until the 84th minute against Burnley. I don't really understand this one. It's clear that the Liverpool attackers need a break. He had to have been given more time than that in the Premier League. Divock Origi, he's certainly regressed in comparison to his own standards of last season and before that, but he couldn't even get a start against the Aston Villa youth side in the FA Cup, not until Liverpool's loss against Burnley did he get a start. His first start in over a month, by the way. A month that saw Liverpool play 9 matches in 6 weeks. And so in our conversation with Ben, he mentioned how Liverpool need a lift because their confidence is so low at the moment. The kind of lift that Bruno was able to bring to Manchester United. Now, of course, United were on a terrible run prior to Bruno's arrival, but the notion is still the same. United's attack was faltering. The whole team was faltering, and Bruno lifted them all.
I don't think Liverpool are in that sort of crisis because we've still scored the most amount of goals in the league. I do think Liverpool need that sort of lift from someone. I don't think it's going to be a signing, but a player stepping up, someone like an Oxlade-Chamberlain hitting form at the right time, Naby Keita maybe coming back. But I think most likely it will be Diogo Jota. When he comes back, I can see him going on a good run again.
It is something that absolutely needs to be mentioned, that they had that player that was supposed to either fill in or be an addition to that front line, and suddenly they lost him like when they went through that horrible run of October, November, early November.
But at the same time, Liverpool lead the league in crosses. Let's take this Burnley match as an example. They hit 30 crosses into the box, 22 of which coming from Trent Alexander-Arnold, and not a single one found a Liverpool player. For this, the answer is quite clear. The quality of the crosses may not be to the level that Alexander-Arnold and Robertson were serving up in seasons past, as teams have identified them as an issue, something they need to take care of, and give them far less room. That, and of course,
when you think about who our attackers are, it's Roberto Firmino, who's 5'11", Salah, who's 5'8", Mane, who's 5'9", going up against 6 or 7 defenders in the box. You know, against like someone like Semi Ajayi, he's the one who springs to mind the most, is like 6'7", and we continue to put crosses in. And I think if we're going to do that, we need to have a different player to use, a different option.
So who could Liverpool bring in to help in this regard, to fix their attacking issues? Maybe you could look to Atalanta for a Duván Zapata, or maybe a player that Liverpool already has on the books, and one that would fulfill his dream if he was to join the Reds.
I wrote about Taiwo Aveni for first time finish, and I think he could well be that option. He's quite tall. He's, I think, in the top 10 for headed goals per 90 in Europe's top 5 leagues. We have Origi, but he's kind of dropped off. He's not really favoured by Klopp because he doesn't do the defensive work rate. He doesn't have the defensive work rate. He doesn't pressure his opponents as well. He doesn't do the press. And Aveni does. In the Bundesliga, he has the best press success percentage rate out of any forward. So he does the pressing. He has the work rate. He scores headed goals. So, you know, he can get at the end of a Trent Alexander-Arnold cross or an Andy Robertson cross.
Quick aside, the article that Ben mentioned on Awoniyi is linked below. Be sure to check it out.
Another one is probably Patson Daka, who is a big Liverpool fan. When I interviewed his coach, he told me that he is a lifelong Liverpool fan who strangely idolized Luis Suarez growing up. He modeled his game on Luis Suarez. And when he scored against us in pre-season, Lee, his coach, was telling me that was like a dream come true for him. He would be my personal favorite because he's used to that pressing style at Salzburg, and he is really good at getting at the end of crosses.
Liverpool doesn't have a talent problem. They have an injury problem and a depth problem in defense, and arguably in the striker position, given that it seems Divock doesn't have the trust of Klopp like he used to. They also seem to have a form problem, but a couple more depth signings to flesh out the squad in defense and maybe a striker, while rotating the attackers a bit more, and Liverpool would likely be back to their best. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, do subscribe to find plenty more like it on Rabona TV. My name's Adrian. Make sure you check out Ben's work on First Time Finish and beyond. But other than that, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.